And I think that's why.
But you were producing something. I mean, you produced a family. You had a successful medical practice. You were important to your patients and their families. You were a member of the community, paying taxes and contributing in a number of ways. You didn't have to do this to be productive.
I don't think I can explain exactly why, other than the fact that I enjoyed it and thought it was important. And I mentioned frequently in speeches that I feel very lucky, very blessed that I've been able to do two things. And, economically, it would have been much better to not disrupt my medical practice. The first time I did it, I was missing it. That was one of the strong motivations for not running for that seat again. Go back home and get back in the baby business again. But I feel very lucky that I've been able to do two things. And exactly why I needed two things instead of one, I'm not sure.
Well, there had to be something that was missing in your life, I would assume.
Well, I think it was the satisfaction of an intellectual challenge. Maybe there was an instinct to always want to be a teacher, and this is part of it.
It doesn't seem to me that it was you were drawn to politics per se, it must be very addictive for people who get into it, craving adulation, recognition, moving up through a system, achieving ultimate success, whether it's a governor or a senator or running for president.
Spend a lot of money on their own. They put everything in one basket. I see that with the other people on the stage. I mean, some of them this is it.
Right.
They've spent their whole life making these plans. And I don't look at it that way at all. I mean, if I could have had an influence without being in office, I would have been quite happy. What is it worth if you don't stand for something? To me, it's worth nothing. Matter of fact, it's a strong negative if you do it just for the glorification of the individual.
One could argue that, well, if you had been a college professor and had thousands and thousands of students over the course of your tenure, that would have been an influence. You could have had a large influence on them as well.
And you could probably convince me that there might be a lot more important to America than I've been. I might be better known, but they might have the deep influence, and that's where the change has occurred in the last 30 years, intellectual change. And you can't have a revolution without the intellectual change. And that was the question I had in my mind when I told people I didn't want to do it. I did not know if the intellectual change had already occurred. And right now, I'm beginning to think maybe it did occur. And maybe the groundwork has been laid for people willing to have change. But it's the failure of the system that is also participating in it. Not only the intellectual change is the understanding of free market economics, the failure of our system. The epitome of government failure is the billions of dollars spent by the federal government trying to solve the problems brought about by Katrina. New Orleans is still 2/3 unbuilt, and none of the government buildings have been rebuilt. The only houses have been rebuilt are done privately. Billions of dollars buying trailers that never be used, passing out money to people that didn't even live in New Orleans.
Right.
I mean, and I talk a lot about that, the failure of government, and they know it. They know deep down in their heart. I talk about us blowing up bridges in Iraq, rebuilding bridges in Iraq, and our own bridges are falling down. And there's such clear evidence of the failure of our system because we have drifted from the beliefs of America and our Constitution.
One thing in your campaigns that seems to differentiate you from other candidates, not particularly novel observation, but you don't talk about yourself. Everybody else seems to be trying to define who they are for people. It seems like you
I don't like that. You don't hear me saying, I'm going to do this when I'm president. The other day they had me looked at some ads. They said, you need to do some of this. And I think I was in there 14 times, in a short, several ads. And I joined them. It's their revolution. It's our campaign, and I think that's very important because it's not about me. And of course, they'll argue with me. They'll want to give me more credit than I think I deserve. But to me, it's an intellectual movement, and the people have to be with you.
But how can you run for president
And not be I.
and not be about you? Right.
Well, it is strange because I tell them that I should take a pay cut because I don't want to run their lives, I don't want to run the economy, and I don't want to police the world, so I'm not going to have much to do. But and then I tell them, well, that means it sounds like I want to be a weak president, and the American people want a strong president. We want somebody to stand firm and take care of everything. I said, well, the strength that I'll have will be to resist the temptation to use power illegally. To resist, you have to be strong, not to yield to the temptation to tell people how to live, to enforce laws that are foolish and unconstitutional, and resist the pressure of the status quo, and resist the pressure of the special interest. So my strength would be used in a different manner. And I think it's true. You can use strength in different ways. It's not that you would just be sitting on a stool and not doing anything. But you don't use your strength and your power and authority to impose your will on other people and tell you what your habits ought to be. I don't want to enforce marijuana laws against you. What if you're sick and you feel better if you smoke marijuana? And what if the law says you're allowed to in the state? I don't want to enforce laws like that. And I talk about that all the time. And these are very conservative religious audience, and nobody seems to, they say, yeah, that makes sense. In the same sense, I don't want to tell you that you can't buy vitamins. People who are in nutritional medicine right now, they're terrified that the WTO wants to take it over, and the international drug companies want to control it. So you can't go out and buy nutritional substances without permission of the international drug companies through WTO regulation. And the government comes and tells you tell your kids have to have all these immunizations. Well, maybe they're good, maybe they're bad. But why shouldn't the parents decide, not the government? I don't want it. I want to resist that and stop it.
As a physician, of course, you had to prescribe medicine frequently. Does the government have a proper role in helping to regulate the quality and consistency of medicines and products that people take?
Not really. The government has a role to play. If I'm your doctor and I work with a drug company and they say, well, this is the antibiotic we should use, and they've screwed up and I screwed up and gave you the wrong antibiotic, the government, then you have recourse. But I don't think it can do it with prior restraint. I don't want to have any prior restraint in economics any more than I want on what you write tomorrow. I mean, I don't want, George Bush, who might be my protector, say, well, run the article by George Bush. Prior restraint would be foolish. But in principle, it's the same thing if we do that on you getting vitamins. We want the government to give this prior approval, but you have to resort to other things, your own judgment, trusting your doctor,